Next, on Currents News, a Brooklyn neighborhood is on high alert. We're taking the pulse of the people.
Sunset Park is seeing an alarming rise in new coronavirus cases. I'm Jessica Easthope with the message St. Michael's Church is sending to its parishioners.
A big roadblock could stand in the way of reopening the Big Apple's public schools. We'll tell you who's objecting and why. Catholic parents in the city are hoping they're not forgotten when it comes to new pandemic aid. A Catholic leader joins us to explain why the money is crucial. Speaking of money, now is the time to save some on school supplies. We'll tell you about the best buys.
And on the payroll tax, we'll be terminating the payroll tax.
That's what funds Social Security and Medicare. The president says he'll kill it if he's reelected. Plus, Israel is cutting a peace deal with a former enemy. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. A warning light flashing in a Brooklyn neighborhood is sparking a big effort to get everyone tested for coronavirus. Sunset Park is being hit with a slew of new infections. Currents News' Jessica Easthope is in Sunset Park, taking the pulse of the people and listening to a church's message to parishioners.
The citywide COVID-19 infection rate in New York is now around 1%. In Sunset Park, Brooklyn, it's nearly 7%.
We do have some of the biggest majority of undocumented immigrants as well as low-income Hispanics and African-American populations in the city. So this obviously goes to speak for the lack of resources and the lack of medical attention that these people can afford.
Recently, 3,300 people in Sunset Park were tested for coronavirus. 228 were positive. The city says the cause of the spike is a mystery, but Daniela Alba, a parish secretary at St. Michael's Church in Sunset Park, says she thinks the community's Latin culture is playing a role.
We come from a culture where a lot of people want to be out and about for the summer, and we hope that everyone understands that you can take the risk, but the consequences are going to be dire just because of the lack of income and the lack of awareness that exists in this community.
The virus has hit immigrant-rich communities in New York City the hardest. New spikes are also being seen in the Rockaways and the Bronx. According to the latest city data, Hispanics outnumber all other ethnicities in overall coronavirus cases and deaths. St. Michael's requires parishioners to socially distance, wear a mask, and have their temperature taken before coming in.
This is the cluster.
Father Fulgencio Gutierrez, the new pastor of St. Michael's, says the church is doing everything it can to keep parishioners safe. But once they leave, it's up to them.
They're not following the guidelines and the norms, social distancing, and I hope that the people will get it.
The pandemic has wounded the physical and financial well-being of the undocumented community. Daniela says St. Michael's is connecting as many parishioners as possible with community resources.
Really and truly what the aim is to do what Jesus Christ did. And that's what we're called to do at all times, and especially now during this pandemic, during this uptick, and for the people of Sunset Park.
The city is knocking on doors, posting flyers, and making calls in Sunset Park. Father Fulgencio says faith will help the community make it through.
We believe that God is with us, that Jesus is walking with us through the storm, that we're not alone, and together we will conquer. Together we will cross the storm victorious.
In Sunset Park, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Getting public school kids back into classrooms is hitting a snag tonight. The unions representing teachers and principals are demanding a delay of several weeks. They're telling Mayor Bill de Blasio they don't think the city has the protocols in place to make face-to-face learning safe. City Hall is pushing for the million-plus public school students to return to classrooms 1 to 3 days a week starting September 10th. It may be September before Americans see another stimulus check to keep them afloat during the COVID crisis. Right now, the latest relief package is stuck in limbo. Senate Republicans are putting forward a $1 trillion deal, while House Democrats have approved a $3 trillion package. Talks to bridge the gap are at a stalemate. At the same time, Catholic schools and universities are pushing for their fair share of the first CARES Act that rolled out in May. Coming up later in the newscast, we'll speak with Jim Coltrara from the New York State Catholic Conference about whether the stimulus bill will help parents keep their kids in Catholic schools. And while the push for reopening schools intensifies, a new warning from the top doctor at the CDC. This fall could be the worst we've ever had when it comes to public health. Chris James has the story.
This is the greatest public health crisis that hit this nation in a century.
Dr. Robert Redfield, director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, issuing a strong warning to Americans regarding COVID-19.
I'm asking you to do 4 simple things. Wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands, and be smart about crowds. If we don't do that, as I said back last April, this could be the worst fall from a public health perspective we've ever had.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration echoing the guidance, publishing a list of tips for families. Again, reminding Americans to wash their hands, wear a mask, and social distance. Additionally, the FDA is asking people to donate blood due to the ongoing shortages due to the pandemic. All this comes as local officials debate how and when to get kids back to school safely.
We haven't seen our kids since March, and there are a lot of mental health issues that they're struggling with. And learning is better in person, but only if it's safe.
And with some schools already in session, how to handle outbreaks continues to be a major concern for both educators and parents. More than 2,000 students, teachers, and staff have already been quarantined across 5 states after outbreaks of new cases occurred after those schools reopened. In New York, Chris James, Currents News.
The actual coronavirus death toll could be a lot larger than we've known. A new analysis of CDC data done by the New York Times is finding that at least 200,000 more Americans have died than usual since March. That's about 60,000 higher than the deaths directly linked to COVID. The analysis is suggesting people with the disease are dying from other causes made worse by the virus. There is some good news tonight. People are returning to work. For the first time since March, initial jobless claims fell below 1 million. According to the Labor Department, 963,000 Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week. That's the lowest number since the pandemic shut down the U.S. economy. There's also some encouraging news coming out of the Middle East tonight. President Trump says Israel and the United Arab Emirates have reached a historic peace agreement. He says after 49 years, the two nations will normalize their diplomatic relations. Under the deal, Israel will suspend plans to annex parts of the West Bank, land sought by the Palestinians for their future state. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister of Iraq wants his country's future to include Christians. Mustafa al-Kazemi is calling on Christians to return home to Iraq now that the Islamic State has been defeated. He called Christians the original children of the country. Cardinal Luis Rafael Sacco says many want to return and says the church supports al-Kazemi's steps toward achieving security throughout Iraq. According to officials in the region, 120,000 Iraqi Christians fled the country when the Islamic State first arrived in 2014. Estimates show only about 1/3 have returned. Lebanon's parliament is declaring the country is in a state of emergency, giving sweeping new powers to the military. The declaration coming after that massive explosion in Beirut killed more than 200 people and left hundreds of thousands homeless. Under the emergency decree, the military can crack down on free speech, the press, and the right to assemble freely. Critics call the action a way to end the angry protests raging in Beirut. You can help the people of Lebanon recover from the explosion. The Catholic Near East Welfare Association at cnewa.org is where you can make a contribution. You can make a donation at caritas.org, and monetary gifts through Aid to the Church in Need are being accepted at churchinneed.org. We'll repeat this information at the end of the newscast. And in Brooklyn on Tuesday, August 25th at 7 p.m., Our Lady of Lebanon Maronite Cathedral is holding a prayer service and collection. The church is located at 113 Remsen Street in Brooklyn Heights. There's a lot more news headed your way. Parents of Catholic school students praying for financial assistance to pay tuition. We'll get an update from the New York State Catholic Conference. Plus, in-school, homeschool, hybrid, doesn't matter. Parents are still stocking up on supplies. And Columbus controversy, why some Philadelphia residents are standing guard at the statue of the Italian explorer. Stay with us.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
With September right around the corner, many Catholic school parents hit hard by the pandemic are wondering how they'll pay tuition. They're hoping for some help in the next COVID relief bill. Joining us now to talk more about that possibility is Jim Coltrara from the New York State Catholic Conference. And Jim, here in the Brooklyn Diocese, some parents are scrambling, trying to figure out how they can afford to keep their kids in Catholic schools. What's the latest you're hearing on the next COVID-19 relief bill? Will there be money for Catholic school parents?
Well, there's good news and bad news. In one of the proposals in the U.S. Senate and advanced by the White House as well, there is emergency tuition assistance grants to scholarship granting organizations. So it is part of the proposal. So that's the good news, that some of our federal lawmakers and the president have recognized that need. The bad news is it seems as though the negotiations on the next relief package have stalled. And we can't afford that. The schools are going to reopen and parents are struggling, and we need that relief now.
Now, what will happen if the bill is passed and there's no money allocated for Catholic schools?
Well, there's another provision in the Relief Act that seems to have bipartisan support, and that's the continuation of what's called the Payroll Protection Program and the PPP. That was included in the previous package, and it did help small businesses. It's a small business program, but that actually enabled not-for-profits, including our faith communities, our schools and parishes, to take advantage of those funds to help pay teachers' salaries. So if there is no direct tuition assistance to families, we're hoping that the Payroll Protection Program is continued to at least help pay our teacher salaries to keep our schools open for the parents who want their kids.
Good. And now some of the country's most prominent church leaders, including Cardinal Timothy Dolan, they've been appealing to lawmakers to include financial support in the COVID bill for families to continue to send their children to any non-public school. Do you think their efforts will make a difference?
Well, it's only going to help because we need to, as the three cardinals did, they emphasized the plight of tuition-paying families. And I think the majority of legislators across the country recognize the enormous value that religious and independent schools provide to the country, and they are doing everything they can to make sure that those tuition-paying families get the relief from their federal representatives.
All right, so what can our viewers do to help to make sure the Catholic schools aren't left out when it comes to financial help?
So on the Catholic Conference webpage, the webpage is nyscatholic.org. They can simply click on the tab that says Take Action, and the first action alert there, it provides them an easy means to contact their federal representatives. It'll automatically connect them once they fill in their name and address. It'll connect them to their member of the House of Representatives and to Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand. There's a draft email right there. They can click and send it. And that way they'll be adding their voice to the chorus of those struggling parents and Catholic school administrators asking for financial relief from our federal representatives.
All right, Jim Coltrara from the New York State Catholic Conference, thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And once again, if you want to make sure your voice is heard by your local representatives, just go to nyscatholic.org and click on the Take Action tab. It won't matter if kids are learning online or in class. Parents will still be shopping for those much-needed school supplies. It may come as a surprise, but Mandy Gaither is reporting that this year's back-to-school buying will set records.
Whether it's back to the classroom or back home with a computer, this school year will be like no other. With all the uncertainty, the National Retail Federation says parents with children in elementary through high school plan to spend nearly $790 on average, topping last year's record of expected spending. But there are ways to save. First, shop now. Back to school sales in the first week in September, and buy extra supplies, says Jenny Martin of the Southern Savers website.
It's going to save you a lot come spring when nothing is on sale.
Martin says this time of year you'll find prices that beat Black Friday on things like printers and computers. Some sites offer refurbished models which can save big bucks. And don't forget those coupons.
Target and Staples are both offering 15% off coupons when you register on their website as a teacher, and it is available for homeschool parents.
Spend more for quality on some things like binders and book bags. Some companies offer lifetime warranties. Don't shell out for your child's favorite character. You'll pay for that. And know what your child needs for school.
Chromebook versus a laptop, you're talking about a $300 difference. So don't just jump off trying to grab the best laptop that you can. Really just focus on what they need.
I'm Mandy Gaither.
President Trump is making a promise about taxes if voters return him to the White House in November.
And on the payroll tax, we'll be terminating the payroll tax. After I hopefully get elected, we'll be terminating the payroll tax. So that will mean anywhere from $5,000 to even more per family.
That tax pumps the money into Social Security and Medicare to keep those benefits alive. Trump is saying his plan won't take away from those funds because economic growth will put enough cash into the general fund to cover the programs. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are celebrating an enormous haul of campaign cash. The team has collected more than $34 million since Biden announced the California senator would be his running mate. The biggest fundraising hour was yesterday when the two appeared together for the first time. More than $3 million poured in online. And a new campaign ad for the Catholic presidential candidate highlights the nuns Biden met after shaking hands with Pope Francis at the Vatican.
The first people I saw were a group of nuns who, to me, epitomize everything Pope Francis talked about in his homily and what he stands for, about generosity to other people, about reaching out, about making it a point to understand that we are our brother's keeper.
Despite being inspired by the nuns at the Vatican, Biden is vowing to press the case against religious exemptions to the contraception mandate in the Affordable Care Act. That means if elected, Biden could wind up opposing the Little Sisters of the Poor again. A group of residents in Philadelphia are headed to court to fight a decision to remove a Christopher Columbus statue. After months of debate, the Philadelphia Art Commission voted to place the statue in storage for 6 months until a decision is made on its permanent home. They said the art no longer has the respect as art. But residents who say that's an insult to the Italian-American community vow to stand guard at the statue.
We'll be here around the clock. We'll see if construction equipment comes to remove that statue as they announced, but we're going to block the equipment from coming. That's our plan.
This would be the second statue in the city to be moved since George Floyd was killed by police in Minneapolis, and protests denouncing police brutality and systemic racism in the country erupted. Still to come on Currents News, we're headed back to Rome in our series Roaming the Eternal City. You don't want to miss our next stop.
Americans still aren't able to come to Rome, but that's why we're bringing the Eternal City to you. Our first stop is Piazza Navona, Rome's most famous public square, coming up next.
Also ahead, she's blowing out 103 candles and telling us the secret to such a long life. Don't go away. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Since most Americans can't travel to Europe this year, we decided to bring a little slice of the Eternal City to you virtually. Throughout the summer, our Vatican correspondent Melissa Butts has been taking us on a tour of some of Rome's most popular attractions. This time, we're heading to one of the city's most beloved squares, Piazza Navona.
Welcome to Rome. Today we're touring Piazza Navona, a favorite of both sightseers and city dwellers alike. These cobblestone streets are normally full of artists, musicians, and tourists, but before the 15th century they had a very different use. Since the 1st century, this square was a center for trading and bartering, a circus and sports venue dedicated to the Emperor Domitian that could hold 30,000 spectators. Yet there was also a much darker side to this iconic piazza.
During this time, it was also the place of persecution of the Christians. So if you can imagine, so many martyrs shed their blood and consecrated this ground right here. It's right here where St. Agnes would have also been one of the many saints who was martyred for the faith.
In fact, her sacrifice is honored with a church dedicated to her, St. Agnes. It houses a relic of her skull. The stairs leading up to it are strategically placed to avoid water damage when Pope Innocent X's sister-in-law would flood the square.
If you can imagine, with end of 17th century technology, managed to flood this entire piazza, about 3.5 feet, in order to recreate naval battle scene.
Today, Piazza Navona's main attraction is the obelisk and the Fountain of the Four Rivers, commissioned by Pope Innocent X in 1650.
People couldn't even imagine that this beautiful fountain could actually support the weight of this amazing obelisk that actually is not from here, comes all the way from Egypt and goes back to about 1500 BC approximately. And so it's called a silent witness because this would have witnessed the Israelites before and during the Exodus.
Once in Rome, the obelisk bore witness to the martyrdom of Christians, the raising of the level of the entire square by 70 feet at the end of the 19th century, and the onslaught of millions of tourists that normally fill Piazza Navona today. In Piazza Navona, artists and musicians interact with tourists all the time, giving this square a friendly yet traditional Italian feel. It's the perfect place to take a passeggiata or a stroll throughout the city so you can get a taste of Rome's great culture and history. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
Tomorrow, Melissa will have a chat with some of Rome's most famous talking statues. We'll explain this centuries-old tradition as our series Roaming the Eternal City continues. And finally tonight, a woman in North Carolina is celebrating a major milestone and thanking God for it. Gussie Dennis says God gave her a light and she's going to let it shine. And on her 103rd birthday, she certainly did. Gussie knows how to have fun, and everyone joined her to celebrate, whether in person, in a car, or on video chat. And her biggest birthday wish is for everyone to experience her unending joy.
I wish God would bless all of you all like He's been blessing me.
And her best advice for a long life, treat others right. That's great. And that is Currents News. Currents News Special Edition, anchored by Michelle Powers, will air tomorrow at 7 p.m. and this weekend, starting Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Several rebroadcasts will follow, including on Sunday. Go to netny.tv for the complete schedule. And before we go, here again is where you can make a donation to help the people of Lebanon. CNEWA.org, Caritas.org, and ChurchInNeed.org. In Brooklyn on Tuesday, August 25th at 7 p.m., Our Lady of Lebanon Maronite Cathedral is holding a prayer service and collection. The church is located at 113 Remsen Street in Brooklyn Heights. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.